What's up, everyone, and welcome to D Spot. This is the spot for all things empowerment through yoga, meditation, and psychoeducation. My name is Dalia. I will be your coach. Thank you so much for joining me. Welcome if it's your first time here, and welcome back if it's not. Thank you so much for joining again. If you have been following my series for a while, you'll know that I've been addressing all the topics and themes that have to do with your mental health and emotions as it pertains to the ongoing genocide happening in Palestine. So, my last video, I talked about resilience. I have other videos on helplessness, anger, grief, secondary trauma, survivor's guilt. There's a lot of resources out there. But in this video, I wanted to talk about ancestral trauma because bearing witness to the atrocities happening in Palestine activates a certain trauma in us Arabs or in any people really who have experienced oppression, war, trauma, whatever, genocides through their genetic lines. Now, for some of us who have lived through war, like when I was in Lebanon for the 2006 war with Israel, I have my core based trauma based on what I experienced for myself, having lived through that war. But for many of us, or many people who have never lived through war themselves, but maybe have parents or grandparents who did, they still feel it too on a cellular level, on a DNA level. And that's because ancestral trauma can be passed down through your genetics. As a matter of fact, I'd go as far as to say that what we are seeing in Palestine right now is a manifestation of the uninterrupted cycle of violence and trauma that's been passed down through the generations. Both Jews and Palestinians have experienced exile, oppression, violence, genocide, and now the trauma is playing itself out quite literally on the battlefield in Gaza. Now, the science of ancestral trauma is discussed within the context of epigenetics. And epigenetics, it explores the idea that the effects of trauma can be passed down through generations at a biological level. So, epigenetics refers to the changes in gene expression that do not involve alterations to the underlying DNA sequence, but can be influenced by environmental factors, including traumatic experiences. Now, ancestral trauma may contribute to changes in the neurobiology of subsequent generations. For example, the offsprings of individuals who have experienced trauma might experience a heightened sense of stress response or a heightened stress response and an increased vigilance in response to potential threats. Epigenetic changes associated with ancestral trauma could potentially increase the susceptibility and the likelihood of someone developing mental health conditions such as anxiety, depression, and PTSD or post traumatic stress disorder in descendants. Now, the good news is that if you're still listening to this video, chances are you, my friend, are the cycle breaker of your family, which means you're the one who's saying the trauma ends with me. I am not passing this shit on to the future generations. And the good news is that ancestral healing is possible. At the heart of healing the ancestral wound is recognizing what is the unresolved pain, what is the detrimental pattern within your family line, what in your family needs healing. And you will see that more often than not, it is a pattern that continuously gets passed down. And mind you, you don't need to have even lived or have parents who lived through war. We're not even just talking about war trauma here, although it is relevant to a lot of what Arabs are experiencing right now, and that's why I'm talking about it. But whatever it is that you've experienced through your ancestral line can also be passed down. So if you've had, great grandparents who lived in scarcity, who didn't have any money, who were hungry or whatever, that trauma gets passed down too. And so you find yourself unconsciously being a bit more frugal, or you find that in your life, I make money and I spend it and I can never save the money. The money's always gone, and you have an effed up relationship with money, even though you have a great high paying job and everything, then chances are you have some kind of ancestral trauma that may have been passed down around scarcity. Now, back to the example of war. Now, I know that personally, I inherited a lot of anxiety and hypervigilance from my parents because they lived through wars. Thank you very much. But learning how to regulate my nervous system, how to reprogram my brain has helped me significantly, not just because it helps me deal with that anxiety better, but also because I know that it's changing the chemical and hormonal structure of my body. Because when we're living in a state of constant stress and we don't even realize why we're just stressed all the time, we're just more prone to feeling anxious all the time, that's going to increase the cortisol levels in your body. And when your cortisol level stays high, that's no good. That changes the chemistry of your body. And so we have to make ourselves into our own sanctuaries and pass on the good things to the future generations, because just like trauma can be inherited, so can healing, so can resilience, so can strength, so can perseverance, so can all the good things. That is called the epigenetic adaptation. And there is also a lot of research to indicate that epigenetic adaptations can occur and enhance resilience in response to stress in future generations. So not only can you break the cycles of trauma that have been passed down through your ancestral line, but you can also inject some good shit in there to pass on to the future generations. Look at you go. Good on you. Now, how do we go about doing this? How do we go about healing the ancestral trauma? The first thing I'll invite you to do is take some time and reflect on your family history. Maybe talk to your parents, talk to your cousins, talk to your family. What stories have been passed down? Are there certain patterns of challenges? Are there certain patterns of resilience that seem to be on repeat? Pay special attention, obviously, to periods of war or conflict, but consider the specific traumas your ancestors had to endure. Were they displaced? Were they subjected to violence? Or did they experience profound soul shattering loss? Understanding the specifics of what are the patterns, what are the programs, what are the beliefs, what are the traumas that have been passed down can help you target your healing, can help the healing become more specific, more targeted, more customized to fixing that issue. And it helps to write down key events to acknowledge not just the weaknesses or the struggles of your ancestral lineage, but also the strengths and the empowerment and the good things too. And just reflect on how those experiences may have influenced the narratives of your parents, of you, and how you have then, how that narrative has affected you, and whether that narrative is something that resonates with you truly, or whether that's something that you would like to rewrite, because you can change your narrative anytime. Also, understanding the dynamics within your family and the relationships between the members of the family is important too. Notice communication styles, notice coping mechanism, notice emotional patterns. For example, I see it very clearly in the Halabi line. We turn to food for comfort so often. It is literally our like love language. But this awareness helps me because I notice that I mindlessly eat a lot and I end up in these binging cycles of eating, especially when I'm stressed, until I realize that this is something that was passed down for me. And the awareness alone forms the foundation for breaking free from that inherited trauma. Because once you become aware of something, your brain can no longer go back to the confines of what it was before that awareness. So a fun little exercise that you can do is create a little family tree. Remember, we used to do that in like elementary school. Well, get your inner child out because we're going to be doing a little family tree, noting key experiences or themes associated with each branch. And this visual representation can reveal connections and help you to identify the patterns that need healing. So, what are some other tools that you can use? So, you've heard me talk about narrative therapy, and I do have a video coming out soon that is specifically all about narrative therapy because it is a profound way to reshape your narrative or the impact around the experiences that you've had or that your ancestors have had. So, when it comes to narrative therapy in this respect, we're talking about focus on the strengths, focus on the resilience, focus on the lessons and the learnings that your ancestors may have or must have or should have learned, because that helps make sure that you are integrating and internalizing the positive things. It also helps as an exercise to write a letter to your ancestors, just acknowledging and their pain, validating their experiences, and reaffirming your commitment to break free from the wounds that they carried. Really pour your emotions on the paper, allow space for releasing and for healing, and maybe even open yourself to become a vessel so that you can channel your ancestral pain and just put it out on paper and get it all out of you. Another way that you can release that pent up trauma or emotions is through somatic therapy or through yoga, trauma informed yoga therapy, any kind of movement or embodiment practice that's going to get you in the body, that's going to get you to connect with those emotions and those traumas and to move them in a healthy way. I highly recommend. I have a healing through somatic yoga videos on my YouTube channel. Make sure you check them out. They're all trauma informed practices that can help you move some of that. All you have to do is just be aware that you are a vessel releasing that trauma, allow that trauma to arise, and trust that your body knows exactly what it needs to do to release it, whether it's shaking or dancing or stomping. And finally, meditation and guided meditation, especially, is a wonderful tool to help you heal those ancestral wounds, especially when you visualize a serene environment where your ancestors can find peace and really visualize them breaking free from the chains of that inherited trauma. Matter of fact, I'm going to be sharing a meditation to heal ancestral trauma this week. So make sure that you watch this space, and hopefully, that's going to be something that will help you on your journey as well. So that is a little bit of information about ancestral trauma, what it is, how it impacts you, and how you can begin to heal it. I think, as with everything, just having awareness is so important. If you are struggling with doing this work, please do reach out to me. If you have any more questions or concerns or feedback, feel free to leave a comment. And don't forget to like, subscribe, share, do all the things, all right? Help me help you. Anyways, thanks again for joining, and I'll see you next time.